It really is very gratifying to be in Georgia this week and kind of hear what the local media is saying, what voters are saying, what listeners are saying. Ben Domenech is the co-founder and the publisher of the Federalist. He's, of course, a writer, blogger. He's the TV commentator. You see him on TV a lot. He's the host of the Federalist Radio Hour. He writes the Transom, and a pretty remarkable voice covering these very, very difficult times. Hey, Ben, welcome to the Mike Gallagher Show. I don't do a lot of guests, but the reason I wanted you on was almost 95%. The purpose was to thank you for the work that the Federalist has been doing in 2020 and beyond. Honestly, I mean, Ben, this has got to be as tough as anything you've ever encountered. It sure has been for me too, but the Federalist has done work that I got to believe you're really proud of.
I am proud of it, Mike, and thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. I don't always come on to radio shows and have hosts compliment the entire effort that we've put into trying to offer people not just the best in terms of opinion commentary about politics and culture, but also the reporting that our folks have done. Looking back on this year, we've had people on the ground in 29 different states, covering this election and everything that's come out of it. And we're continuing to do so and looking forward to what the next couple of years are going to bring in terms of a very interesting time to work in this field of media. But yes, it is a challenge, as you said. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that we're dealing with a Democrat media complex that is, I got to be honest, it is the most biased, the most egregiously dishonest effort that I've ever seen in my lifetime to spin things, to lie about things, and then to tell you when you call them out that you don't know what you're talking about, to gaslight the American people over and over again on all these different subjects. And I think a perfect example of that is actually in these Georgia Senate races where you have, I think, two candidates who in Perdue and Loeffler who represent kind of mainstream Republicanism. They're not radicals in any way, but both of them are up against people who will be vehicles for a radical Democrat agenda. And I think that that's what we saw in last night's debate with Kelly Loeffler and with Reverend Warnock.
And Ben, you mentioned the media bias. It's not exclusive to the national media. I came in here this weekend, and these are local journalists I know that moderated and hosted and fielded the questions or gave the questions for this debate. They're as biased as anything I've ever seen on the national stage. I mean, they're giving Reverend Warnock questions like, "How will you make the oppressed working class Georgians' life better?" And then Kelly Loeffler was like, "Why are you such a corrupt, rich, out of touch?" I mean, Ben, it was you saw it was unbelievable.
It was crazy. So I was as part of the Fox coverage last night. I was sitting in a van watching this, and the questions to Kelly Loeffler where do you point? Aren't you rich and out of touch? And the questions to the Reverend were basically, what do you like better, kittens or puppies? And it was just a ridiculous display. But it also, I mean, what do we expect at this point from our media? Whether it's local, whether it's national, otherwise, we have a media enterprise, and people need to. I realize I said bias. We need to move away from the concept of bias here and just talk about how corrupt they are.
It's corruption. Corruption.
It is corruption.
Yeah.
It is corruption. And when you talk about, for instance, I mean, we're still talking about, the polls got it wrong. The polls, they said this, they said that, and then they got it wrong. Well, did they really get it wrong, or were they trying to sell you a story that the voters didn't buy? Okay. And that's the thing that I think we all need to have in terms of our interpretation, our filter for the media that we're consuming. Is this a situation where they're just botching it because they have a blind spot or they don't know what's really going on? Or is this intentional? Is it meant to sell you a false depiction of a narrative about what's going on? And I think that was on display in the debate, in the sense that Warnock, who's being presented by the media, and they're making every effort to present him as being some kind of centrist outsider, a guy who won't be a typical politician and the like. But then when it came to questions about abortion, when it came to questions about packing the Supreme Court, he sounded more radical than you could possibly imagine. I mean, it was clearly a situation where you had a disconnect between what the media wanted you to take away from that debate and what you actually would take away from that debate if you were paying attention to what each candidate was saying.
And Ben, the question about radically transforming the Supreme Court isn't a tough one. It's either a yes or a no. I mean, his answer was, his first response was, Kelly Loeffler once voted to defund the police. It's like, wait a minute, what? Are you inclined to do it or aren't? And then when they pressed him, at least they did press him on that. The second time he was asked, well, I haven't really spent I haven't focused on that. Come on, Ben, we know the answer. The answer is yes.
Of course, the answer is yes. And the fact is that, look, Democrats really, really wanted to pack the Supreme Court this time around. It's only because of the success of Republicans when it came to House and Senate races that they've been really, sort of put back on their heels when it came to the radical nature of their agenda. And I think that this is a situation where, frankly, the other Democrat running in Georgia, John Ossoff, has said publicly that he won't pack the Supreme Court. I don't know that you can really trust him on that point. But when Warnock won't even say that, won't even say that they won't consider it, that's a demonstration of how radical they really are. And it's a demonstration of the fact that Joe Biden is not going to bring some kind of peace and reconciliation moment in America's culture war. It's not happening. He just named, or is about to name today, the most radical HHS secretary in the history of the country, Javier Becerra, someone who has sued over and over again Christian groups, pro-life groups in California, who has, tried to put David Daleiden, the Planned Parenthood whistleblower, in jail, who is, absolutely one of the most radical culture warriors that you could name for this position. This is a demonstration of who they really are. Don't buy the crap that's being sold to you by the media about this being a moment of civility and unity. It's all about crushing everyone who doesn't agree with them.
Ben Domenech, who's the publisher of The Federalist, is with us here on the Mike Gallagher Show in Atlanta. We're in the studios of AM 920, The Answer, in Atlanta, covering Georgia, focusing on that. Ben, let's talk for just a moment about big picture, because I've been at this a long time. I've spent decades behind a microphone. I've never seen people so angry, so frustrated, so demoralized. I know there's this raging debate about election integrity. It's about as bad as I've ever seen it. Would you agree that Americans are almost despondent about things, and that does not bode well for the next for the months and the years ahead?
Look, I'll be, this is a situation, Mike, as you say, that you don't like to see in terms of the despondency of the American people, the lack of trust in our institutions, in our leaders, in our government. But I'll tell you, I actually have a lot of hope. And part of the reason that I have hope is because I think that the American people are actually better than their leaders, if that makes sense. I think that, Congress is kind of, yes, they're an embarrassment. Yes, the media is an embarrassment. Higher ed is a terrible beast. The teachers' unions have completely robbed, kids across the country of an education this year. There's all sorts of bad things going on. At the same time, I have enormous faith in the American people when it comes to their capacity for good, their ability to love each other and to be good neighbors to each other. And, in this holiday season, to appreciate the things about life that matter the most. And that, to me, gives me great hope about the future, because I think we have a people that are stronger than these corrupt politicians and all these institutions that have failed them. And that's what gives me hope.
That was brilliantly put. In the middle of this mess, I have a Christmas campaign for Prison Fellowship, the Chuck Colson inspired.
Absolutely.
And my listeners already have donated, get this, enough to sponsor over 8,100 children who are children of American prisoners. I mean, that's like we're approaching $200,000 raised in the last 2 weeks for Prison Fellowship on my show. And it reminds me that even as people are frustrated, they're doing such good things, and helping neighbor. Yes. people helping children of prisoners. And we know that a lot of these kids, these are in communities. These are African American communities, Hispanic. These are poor kids who are being raised by an aunt right now or a grandmother, and yet thousands of listeners have donated to this prison fellowship ministry at MikeOnline.com. That's the reason your words of inspiration they don't ring hollow, Ben. They're true. That really is the American story.
We have an incredible capacity for good in this country. And I think that the people in their communities who have the ability to stand up and do that good, you are needed now more than ever, because as much as our politicians fail us, as much as our government institutions fail us, as much as we have distrust for all these things in life in America that we would like to have trust in, what we still can have trust in and have faith in is our fellow Americans who are good, peaceful, free people who choose of their own volition to give and to love and to care to the greatest capacity that they can. And that's something that we see time and again and that we should appreciate, and that I certainly appreciate in this holiday season, in this midst of darkness and of a lot of despair and a lot of pain. That is the thing that can guide us forward and show us the way.
Ben Domenech, every radio host has sort of a go-to, and I'm not kidding you. The Federalist, you, Molly Hemingway, you guys are our go-to, and we cite your work all the time on this show. Millions of Americans appreciate you. I sure do, and it's a joy just to be able to tell you in person how grateful I am for your work, for your clarity, for your passion, and for your patriotism. I just wanted to thank you in person, and thanks for your words today on the Mike Gallagher Show. You keep fighting the good fight, okay?
Thank you so much, Mike. It means a great deal to me that you would say that. God's blessing to you and to yours.
Yeah, you and your family. Merry Christmas, and we'll talk again soon, I hope. Thank you, Ben. I appreciate you joining us. Ben Domenech, just a great patriot and a great voice, and he's one of those guys, honest to goodness, when I see Ben pop up on TV, I turn it up and listen very carefully, and I think you can see why. He's right.